They told her faith was armor, that the Emperor's light would never falter. But when the fire died and the screams echoed back unanswered, Sister Ardent learned what faith costs in a galaxy that devours the faithful. The screams were still rising when Sister Ardent pushed through the smoke. Her armor was cracked, her left pauldron half melted from plasma fire, and her bolter hissed steam where promethium had boiled dry. The chapel of Saint Veridiana burned behind her, its sacred icons collapsing into molten gold, and through the haze, she saw the shadow of the heretics advancing. Every sister of the Order of the Blazing Heart had been called to this moon, Sanctis IX, to hold the reliquary. They had arrived with hymns on their tongues and fire in their eyes. Now there were only 20 left. Ardent had not slept for 3 days. Her lips were split from chanting the litanies until her voice failed, and her mind was held together by sheer will and the memory of Canoness Elira's last words. If you falter, the relic falls, and if the relic falls, faith itself shatters. Ardent repeated those words now as she reloaded. The bolter's mechanism clicked home. Each shell was marked with the seal of purification, tiny parchment prayers that flaked away in the heat. Behind her, Sister Maylis coughed blood into her rebreather. "They're circling east," she rasped. "Ardent, we can't hold this corridor. We need to." "We hold," Ardent said, "until the bells stop." The bells had been ringing since dawn, massive bronze throats that hung above the citadel gates, tolling out the Emperor's name across the battlefield. As long as they rang, the world still belonged to the God Emperor. As long as they rang, they were not yet abandoned. But now, through the roar of flames, Ardent realized she could barely hear them. The air shook. A detonation far too close. Dust rained from the ceiling. The eastern wall shuddered, stone cracking to reveal the pale light of Sanctis IX's dying sky. She could smell ozone and burnt flesh. Maylis turned to her, eyes wide behind her visor. "They've breached." Ardent didn't answer. She ran. Past fallen sisters still gripping their weapons, past shattered statuary and melted candles, into the corridor where faith met fire. The enemy were not men anymore, corrupted husks wrapped in armor of their own making, daubed with unholy symbols. Their voices rose in gibbering mockery of hymns. Ardent fired. The bolter's recoil slammed against her shoulder, each shot a punctuation of fury and prayer. Shells exploded through tainted flesh, splattering the floor with ichor that hissed where it touched sanctified ground. But for every heretic that fell, 2 more came. She felt the walls closing around her, the weight of the Imperium itself pressing down through the endless stone above. Her vox crackled. "Sister Ardent, report." It was the voice of Palatine Ceres, weary but unbroken. "We've lost contact with the western tower, the relic." "Still secured," Ardent gasped, ducking behind a column as a blast of lasfire scorched past her. "But we're surrounded." A pause, then you know what must be done." Ardent froze, her breath caught in the rebreather's filter. She did know, every sister did. There were protocols for when the relic could not be recovered, when the Emperor's enemies would defile it. She glanced back toward the chapel. The reliquary was there, encased in ceramite, shining faintly through the smoke. The bones of Saint Veridiana herself. Maylis saw her expression and shook her head. "No, not yet. If the relic falls into their hands, we'll get it out, we have to." Ardent wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that faith could conjure miracles the way their sermons promised. But her faith had begun to feel heavier than her armor. She rose again, firing until the bolter clicked empty, then drew her chainsword. The weapon's teeth sputtered as they bit into the air. From somewhere deep below, through the thunder of battle, came a sound she had never heard before, a low, droning hum like chanting from beneath the earth. It vibrated through her bones. The heretics faltered for a moment, glancing toward the floor as if they too felt it. Then a crack split the ground. Light, not holy, not gold, but a writhing red, poured from the fissure. Maylis screamed. The floor collapsed beneath her. Ardent reached out, but the light swallowed her hand, searing her gauntlet. She stumbled back, watching as Meles vanished into the glow. And from the fissure rose something shaped like a man, wearing the remnants of a preacher's robes. Its skin was carved with words, prayers written backward, holy verses turned inside out. Ardent fell to her knees. "Emperor, protect me." The creature smiled with teeth too white, too perfect. "He already has." She swung her chainsword. It caught nothing but air as the creature dissolved into smoke. The red light dimmed, leaving the corridor silent again. The heretics had fled, their courage undone by whatever horror they worshipped. Ardent sat amid the ruin, the taste of ash thick on her tongue. Her vox clicked again. Ceres's voice was fainter now. "Ardent, report." She looked down into the crack where Meles had vanished. Her own reflection stared back, distorted, burning. "The enemy withdrew," she said slowly, "but something else is here." "Hold position," Ceres said. "I'm coming to you." The vox cut off. Ardent exhaled, the sound a prayer more than breath. She didn't know if Ceres would reach her. She didn't know if any of them would. Around her, the air still pulsed faintly with that impossible red glow. It flickered like a heartbeat, like something alive beneath the stone. And as the light dimmed, she heard a sound from the fissure, faint, almost tender. A voice whispering her name. Sister Ardent froze, her hand hovering over her weapon. It was Ceres's voice. It was Meles. But Meles was gone. The whisper came again, softer this time, coaxing, pleading. "Ardent, help me." She stared into the fissure. The light pulsed once, brighter. Something moved within it, just beyond sight. Ardent tightened her grip on the chainsword and leaned closer. The voice laughed. The laugh echoed long after the fissure's glow had dimmed, thin and warped, slipping between the ringing in Sister Ardent's ears until it almost blended with the far-off tolling of the cathedral bells. She should have run, should have turned away, sealed the corridor, prayed. Instead she stared, transfixed, into that slit in the stone. There was movement there, shapes too fluid to be bodies, colors her eyes refused to name. Every sermon she had ever heard warned of temptation that began as pity, as love, as the illusion of salvation. But the voice that came from below sounded so much like Meles that Ardent's hand trembled on the edge of the fissure. The stone was hot, searing even through the ceramite of her gauntlet, but she couldn't make herself pull away. "Meles," she whispered, the name sticking to the inside of her throat. "If you can hear me, give me a sign." The light pulsed once, and for an instant she saw a hand reach upward, pale, blistered, the nails cracked to blood, but it was gone before she could grasp it. Only the fissure remained, and that whisper that wasn't quite a voice anymore. The corridor behind her crackled with movement. Boots, the groan of armor plates. Ardent spun, raising her weapon. Palatine Ceres stepped through the smoke, her helm off, her face blackened with soot but her eyes bright with the clarity that only came from exhaustion sharpened into faith. "By the throne, Ardent, what did you do?" she demanded. "This whole wing is collapsing." Ardent pointed to the fissure. Something came up from below. Meles fell in. Ceres knelt beside the crack, peered down, then stood again, her expression tightening. "Seal it. Whatever it isn't her anymore." The words struck harder than the heat. Ardent wanted to argue, but the ground shuddered beneath them again, and far away a siren began to wail, the sound of the convent's last defensive line collapsing. Ceres grabbed her arm. "We have no time. The reliquary must be moved. I need you focused." They ran. The corridors of the chapel were nearly unrecognizable now, choked with smoke and the stink of burned flesh. Vox traffic hissed in bursts of static, the dying fragments of sisters calling out positions, prayers, final words. Ardent heard Canoness Elira's voice once, faint and breaking, shouting orders to fall back to the sanctum, and then nothing but static. They reached the reliquary chamber to find the sacred vault half buried in debris. The statue of Saint Veridiana lay toppled, its face cracked open to reveal only hollow stone within. The bones of the saint, wrapped in silks, glowed faintly in the light of the burning icons around them. Ceres and Ardent moved together, years of drill flowing through muscle memory. They attached lift harnesses, activated the servo motors, began hauling the reliquary toward the inner transit shaft. "Extraction point Theta," Sarah said between breaths. "If the shuttle is still there, we can make orbit and link with the fleet." "If," Ardent repeated. Saris gave her a grim smile. "Faith requires the word if, otherwise it would only be knowledge." They had almost reached the shaft when the air changed. The heat dropped out of the world, the flames stilled, the smoke hung motionless as if held by unseen hands. A single toll of the bell rolled through the silence, drawn out into an inhuman note. The reliquary's light dimmed. Then the fissure's glow returned, this time bleeding through the very floor beneath them. From the fissure, hundreds of hairline cracks spread across the stone like veins of molten glass. The light swelled until it seemed to fill every shadow. Shapes pressed against the surface from below, stretching it like skin. Arden saw faces, screaming, pleading, grinning, and among them, for the briefest moment, Maylies again, eyes wide and mouth open in a silent cry. Saris raised her bolter. "Back, back now." The floor exploded upward. Stone fragments became shrapnel. Ardent was thrown against the wall, her helm shattering against the impact. Through the haze she saw Saris still standing, her armor torn open at the shoulder, the bolter firing wildly into the blinding red light. Something emerged from that light, something that wore armor marked with the sigils of the Adepta Sororitas but blackened, distorted, fused with bone. The corrupted sister moved faster than seemed possible. She seized Saris by the throat and lifted her off the ground. "We prayed," the creature hissed, its voice 1,000 whispers in one. "And he did not answer, but they did." Ardent lunged, driving her chainsword into the abomination's back. The weapon screamed as it tore through corrupted flesh, spraying molten blood. The creature turned, swatting her aside as though she were a child. Its eyes burned like coals. "You still believe, Ardent, even now." Ardent spat blood, her fingers searching for the fallen bolter. "Belief is all that's left." She fired. The shell detonated inside the thing's chest, blowing it apart in a shower of red mist. The silence afterward was worse than the noise. Saris collapsed, clutching at her throat, gasping. The reliquary lay in ruins, the sacred bones scattered like debris. For the first time since she had taken her vows, Arden felt no presence when she whispered the Emperor's name, only the faint pulse of that alien light below. Saris dragged herself upright, blood streaking her chin. "It's spreading," she rasped. "The whole sanctum will collapse. We have to warn the fleet." Ardent nodded numbly. Together they limped through the shattered halls, stepping over the fallen. Every few meters they passed sisters who still lived, half-buried, whispering prayers through the smoke. Ardent stopped for one, a novice whose arm was crushed beneath a girder. The girl clutched a rosarius and smiled up at her with blood on her teeth. "Did we win?" she asked. Ardent didn't answer. She just pressed the girl's hand until the light left her eyes, then rose again and followed Saris into the darkness. They reached the transit shaft, but the lift was gone, only the empty tunnel descending into blackness. "We climb," Saris said. Her voice was steady again, the voice of command. They began the ascent, servo motors whining, armor scraping metal. Ardent climbed above her, the weight of the reliquary fragments strapped to her back. She didn't dare look down. Halfway up, a tremor ran through the shaft. The walls split and the red light bled through. The air grew thick, heavy as oil. Ardent's vision swam. She heard voices whispering prayers she didn't know, calling her name, promising rest, promising forgiveness. She bit her tongue until she tasted copper and kept climbing. Saris called up to her, "You still hear it, don't you?" "Yes." "Then you still have faith. When it stops, that's when you should be afraid." Ardent wanted to tell her it had stopped hours ago, but she kept climbing. When they emerged, the night sky was gone, replaced by a ceiling of fire. The fortress had become a mountain of ash. The air was thick with dust and the sound of distant engines. Dropships, she realized, descending through the atmosphere, but they bore no aquila on their hulls. Their paint was black, their lights a sickly green. Saris took one look and cursed, "Chaos reinforcements." They ran for the last functioning trench line where a handful of sisters were still fighting. The ground was slick with melted glass. Bolter fire flickered in the distance, a dying heartbeat of defiance. Ardent joined the line, shoulder to shoulder with the last of her order. She felt her exhaustion fade into something harder, colder. Not faith exactly. Resolve. When the heretics came again, they didn't scream. They sang. A hymn in reverse, notes falling where they should rise. Ardent fired until her weapon jammed, then drew her chainsword and waded into them. Around her, the world narrowed to noise and blood and heat. The line broke. Saris fell beside her, a blade through her abdomen. Ardent caught her before she hit the ground. "Go," Saris gasped. "The Emperor, he needs witnesses. Tell them what we saw." Ardent shook her head. "I won't leave you." "You already have," Saris whispered and smiled. "A small, peaceful thing." Then she was still. Ardent stood, the battle roaring around her, and for a moment she saw all of it from above. The burning fortress, the dying faithful, the relics shattered and ground into dust. The galaxy did not care. Even the Emperor, seated on his throne, would not hear this place die. And yet, something deep inside her refused to surrender. She tore the purity seals from her armor, pressed them to her heart, and began to walk forward into the enemy. Every step was a prayer. Every breath was defiance. When the ground cracked again beneath her feet, she did not stop. The fissure widened, the red light blooming brighter than the firestorm above. It reached for her like a tide. She plunged in willingly. For an instant there was no pain, no weight, only silence. And then a voice, not the whispers of before, but something vast and cold, spoke through her mind. "Now you understand. Faith is not armor, it is hunger." Ardent screamed, though no sound left her throat. She felt her armor melt away, her flesh burning to ash, and then something deeper stirring beneath it, something not entirely her own. When she opened her eyes, she was standing once more in the reliquary chamber. The fires were gone. The walls were whole again. And kneeling before her was Meles, alive, smiling, her hands folded in prayer. "Welcome back," Meles said softly. Ardent reached up, touched her face, expecting the scar, the soot, the pain. There was nothing. Her armor gleamed. The air was cool, but outside the windows the stars had vanished. A new dawn was rising, one of crimson light. When Sister Ardent opened her eyes, the silence was so complete it hurt. The air hung thick and still, like the pause before a bell toll. The crimson horizon pulsed faintly beyond the high windows of the sanctum, neither sunrise nor fire, something in between. For a moment she thought she had died. Then she realized she was breathing. Her armor was whole again, polished, its ceramite plates unscarred. Her weapons hung ready at her side, cleaned and reloaded. The scent of burning flesh and promethium had vanished, replaced by incense. The floor beneath her was smooth and unbroken, as though the battle had never touched this place. Only Meles knelt before her, head bowed in prayer. "Meles," Ardent's voice faltered. The sound came out flat, as though the room swallowed it. "How?" Meles looked up, and her smile was serene. "The Emperor heard us, sister. Our suffering was not in vain." Ardent stepped closer. Meles' eyes shone with unnatural clarity, too bright, too steady. "The fortress burned," Ardent said. "You fell, we all fell." Meles stood, taking her hand with the gentleness of a novice comforting a dying patient. "We fell, yes, but he lifted us. Look around. The war is over. The faithless are gone." Ardent turned. The sanctum stretched endlessly in every direction. Hundreds of sisters filled the pews, heads bowed in perfect unison, voices whispering a hymn she didn't recognize. Their faces were calm, their armor immaculate. Every one of them was someone Ardent had seen die. "No," Ardent whispered, "this isn't real." Meles' smile didn't falter. "Reality was the illusion, sister. Pain, fire, doubt, those were the lies. This is his will made manifest." But Ardent's training screamed at her. every instinct honed by years of prayer and battle. Nothing pure ever shone this red. The air itself tasted sweet, cloying like spoiled wine. She pulled her hand free and stepped back. "What did you do, Meles?" The younger woman blinked, her voice soft, almost hurt. "I believed." The chorus of voices rose behind her, hundreds singing the same word over and over. Believe, believe, believe. The sound swelled until it pressed against Ardent's skull. The walls seemed to pulse with it, veins of light running through the stone. "Enough," Ardent roared, her voice breaking through the hymn. "Where is the canoness? Where is Palatine Ceres?" "They're here," Meles said. "We're all here now." Ardent turned and froze. Standing at the altar were Canoness Elira and Ceres, robes unburnt, their faces glowing with the same crimson light. Elira's voice carried across the hall like a benediction. "Sister Ardent," she said warmly, "at last, you've seen the Emperor's mercy." Ardent fell to her knees, confusion tearing at her mind. "I saw you die," she said. "The heretics breached the sanctum, you fell in the fire." "And were reborn," Elira replied. "Through flame we are made pure. The Emperor's light is vast. He reveals himself in ways our mortal eyes once mistook for corruption. But now you see, don't you? Now you feel him as we do." Ardent's hands trembled. She could feel something, a pulse beneath her skin, slow and rhythmic, echoing from the floor itself. It was intoxicating. It filled her chest with heat, with the illusion of peace. For an instant she wanted to believe. But then she remembered Ceres' final words before death. "When it stops, that's when you should be afraid." She forced herself to look into their eyes. Behind the serenity, behind the glow, there was hunger. A faint curl at the corner of Elira's mouth, too sharp to be joy. "You're not Elira," Ardent whispered. The canoness smiled wider. "Names are nothing. We've been given new purpose, a new father, and he calls to you too." The hymn shifted. The voices deepened, blending into a tone that wasn't human anymore. The air shimmered with heat. The crimson light thickened until it felt like liquid pouring through the cracks in her armor. Ardent stumbled backward, drawing her bolter. "In the Emperor's name." The word Emperor burned her throat like acid. Elira raised her hand, and every sister in the pews turned toward Ardent in perfect silence. Hundreds of eyes glowed red in the dim. "Faith was our cage," Elira said softly. "Now it is our weapon." The first shot tore through Elira's chest. She barely flinched. The second shattered Meles' face, but the girl only laughed, blood glowing as it spilled. The hymn became a scream. Ardent ran. She fired until the weapon clicked empty, then drew her chainsword and carved through the first wave of sisters that lunged for her. Their armor shattered easily, as though made of glass. Beneath the plates, their flesh was molten, forming itself again as soon as it fell apart. She cut a path through the aisle, stumbled into the corridor beyond, and slammed the door shut. Her breath rasped loud inside her helm. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of light spreading outward as though the building itself were alive. She turned a corner and froze. A sister stood in the shadows ahead, holding a lantern. Her armor was old, antique pattern, predating the ecclesiarchy's reforms. Her face was hidden by a silver mask etched with litanies. "Stay back," Ardent warned, raising her sword. The woman tilted her head. Her voice was faint but clear. "You still hear the true silence. That means he hasn't taken you yet." Ardent lowered the blade slightly. "Who are you?" "I was Sister Superior Varin, Order of the Ebon Chalice," the woman said. "I've been wandering this place for 3 days or 3 centuries, I can't tell. Time doesn't work here." Ardent frowned. "Then you've seen them, the others?" Varin nodded. "They think they're saved. They're not. Whatever came through the fissure, it twisted their faith until it became worship of something else. The same words, the same prayers, but a different meaning." Ardent's pulse hammered. "Can we stop it?" The masked sister's lantern flickered. "If you destroy the heart of the cathedral, maybe, but you won't survive. It feeds on belief. Every step you take toward it, it'll try to make you love it. Then I won't love it, Ardent said. Varian's laugh was quiet, tired. That's what I said. They moved together through the warped corridors, stepping over melted icons and charred banners. The further they went, the stronger the heartbeat in the floor became, until Arden could feel it matching her own. Once, she thought she heard Sarah's voice whispering in her ear, "You left me there, sister." The pulse quickened. The air thickened again, forcing each breath like drawing through water. Varian led her into what had once been the cathedral's crypt, a vast circular chamber lined with sarcophagi. Now, the coffins hung open. The bones inside glowed faintly red. In the center of the room, a massive heart of stone beat within a web of living veins that pulsed from the walls. "This is it," Varian said, raising her lantern. "The heart of the heresy." The veins reacted, recoiling from the light. 1,000 whispers filled the room at once, voices of every sister who had ever died here, their prayers turned inside out. Ardent's mind reeled. She saw flashes of faces, Maylis, Elira, Saris, all smiling, all calling her name. "Ardent," they whispered, "you could have saved us." She raised her bolter. "Maybe I still can." The heart pulsed faster. Blood, or something like it, splashed across the floor. The lantern's flame flared brighter and Varian cried out, dropping to her knees. "It's too strong." Ardent ran forward, ignoring the pain that clawed at her skull. Each step brought waves of false memory, visions of peace, of laughter, of the Emperor descending in light to bless them all. She almost believed it, until she remembered the corpses in the ash, the novices burned alive, Saris gasping for breath. She screamed and fired into the heart. Each shell tore deep, spraying molten ichor. The cathedral shook. Statues cracked and fell. The heart let out a sound like every prayer in the galaxy being spoken backward at once. Varian dragged herself upright, raising her lantern high. Now. Together they plunged their weapons into the pulsing mass. The explosion of light blinded them both. When Ardent opened her eyes again, the crimson glow was gone. Only pale morning light filtered through the cracks above. The cathedral was in ruins again, blackened, silent. The air was cool. Varian lay beside her, her mask shattered, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Ardent crawled to her, checked for a pulse. Nothing. She closed the sister's eyes and whispered a prayer that felt hollow even as she said it. She rose slowly, looking around. The fissure had closed. The walls were still. But outside, beyond the broken glass, the sky wasn't blue. It was gray, dead, and silent. Something had changed. Ardent stepped through the shattered doorway into the open courtyard. Dozens of sisters' bodies lay scattered across the ash. For a moment she thought they were dead, but then one moved, twitching. Another began to rise. Their eyes were normal again, no crimson light. They looked confused, frightened. Ardent felt tears sting her eyes. "You're free," she whispered. Then from the far side of the courtyard a low hum began. Engines, Imperial pattern dropships descending through the clouds. Relief flooded her. The fleet had returned. But when the first ship broke through the smoke, she saw the sigil painted on its hull. Not the double-headed Aquila. Not chaos, something new, a golden starburst surrounded by a ring of thorns. She didn't recognize it, but every fiber of her being told her it wasn't salvation. As the ships landed, armored figures emerged, humanoid, but their armor gleamed with that same soft red hue she thought she had banished. One of them raised a vox amplifier, his voice carrying over the wind. "Faith endures," he said. "And faith has evolved." Ardent gripped her weapon again, though her hands were shaking. She turned to the sisters behind her, their faces pale, exhausted. "We're not done," she said. None of them answered. When the first dropship door opened, the light that spilled out was crimson. Ardent raised her sword, then let it be crimson. And she charged. The sky was no longer a sky, it was a wound. Gray light poured through cracks that spread like veins across the firmament, pulsing in rhythm with the engines of the descending ships. Each craft split open with a hiss of pressure, and from their bellies poured ranks of soldiers clad in crimson-tinted armor. Their movements were too disciplined for chaos, too reverent for mere soldiers. They advanced in perfect silence, their visors reflecting the ruin of the cathedral. Sister Ardent stood amid the ash, her breath fogging the inside of her cracked helm. Around her, the surviving sisters of the Blazing Heart struggled to rise, some limping, some clutching broken weapons, but all still breathing. Their faith had carried them this far. Whether it would carry them further, she no longer knew. The nearest of the crimson soldiers halted 20 paces away. One stepped forward, unhelmed. His face was young, almost painfully so, eyes pale and without pupils, skin marked by delicate traceries of red light that pulsed beneath the surface. He looked at Ardent as though he'd known her all his life. "Your suffering is over," he said. His voice was calm, not threatening, almost tender. "The Emperor's design has reached its perfection. You have no need to fear." Ardent raised her bolter. "The Emperor's design needs no perfection. It is absolute." The man smiled faintly. "Once I might have said the same, but faith is not static, sister. It grows, evolves. You have witnessed it. You fought within the wound of his rebirth." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "You speak heresy." He didn't move. "Do I? The old faith burned entire worlds and called it devotion. The new faith will heal them. The old emperor was distant, a god of death. The new one lives through us." The hum behind him deepened. More ships descended. The soldiers began to spread out, not in formation for war, but as pilgrims entering a shrine. They fell to their knees in the ash, heads bowed, hands clasped in silent prayer. Ardent's heart hammered. She didn't know what was worse, their reverence or their peace. She could feel something tugging at her mind, soft as a whisper, coaxing her to lower her weapon. Behind her, Sister Corva, barely 20, her armor still bearing the marks of novice insignia, stumbled forward. "Sister Ardent," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What if he's right? What if this is what he wanted?" Ardent turned sharply. "Do not finish that thought." "But we saw it," Corva said. "The light, the voices, they were singing his name. What if he's changed? What if the Emperor—" "Enough." The word cracked like a gunshot. Corva flinched and fell silent. Ardent looked around. The others stared at her with hollow eyes. They'd lost too much: blood, faith, sense of what was real. The world itself seemed to shift beneath their boots, uncertain whether it was stone or flesh. The crimson soldier watched her quietly. "There's no shame in fear, sister. I was afraid too, before I accepted the truth. Before I saw his light not as fire, but as dawn." "Your dawn reeks of sorcery," she spat. He tilted his head. "Then test it. Strike me down if you can." She hesitated. He spread his arms, unarmed, unarmored. Around him, the kneeling soldiers began to hum softly, a wordless hymn that made the air vibrate. Ardent pulled the trigger. The bolter roared. The shell struck his chest and vanished in a bloom of light. No blood, no flesh, only radiance. When it cleared, he was still standing. The mark of the aquila glowed on his chest, but the wings were twisted, curved inward like claws. "Faith cannot kill faith," he said gently. "You are still his daughter, Ardent. You only need to see." A wave of warmth flooded her body. It was gentle, intoxicating. Her exhaustion ebbed. The pain in her limbs faded. The broken edges of her armor seemed to knit themselves together. She heard Maylee's voice again, faint but distinct. "He's trying to make you love it." She fell to her knees, clutching her head. "No," she whispered. "No, I won't." The crimson soldier stepped closer. His shadow fell over her. "It's all right. The Emperor no longer punishes. He embraces. The galaxy has suffered long enough." Something in those words broke her restraint. Ardent surged upward, driving her chainsword through his chest. This time the blade found resistance, metal and bone, not light. He gasped, eyes wide. For an instant she saw confusion there, even sorrow. Then the blade screamed to a halt and blood, real blood, dark and thick, poured out. The kneeling soldiers rose as one. The hum became a howl, bolters leveled. Ardent tore her sword free and turned. "Form up," she shouted. "In his name now." They obeyed, though fear trembled in their movements. The courtyard exploded in gunfire. Red bolts and white streaks crisscrossed the air, ripping through the haze. Ash rose in storms. The crimson soldiers fell, but more took their place. Each one that died seemed to dissolve into light that drifted skyward, feeding the wound above. Corva was hit first. The shot pierced her helm clean through. She fell without sound. 2 others followed. The ground shook under the weight of the ship still descending. Ardent's vox crackled faintly in her ear, a voice she hadn't heard since the siege began. "Ardent," it said, "this is Canoness Elira. Do you read?" She froze. "You're dead." "Not dead, reforged." The voice was calm, confident. "Surrender your arms. This world is his now. You have done your duty. Rest." Ardent clenched her jaw. "If you were truly Elira, you'd know we rest only when we're ash." The voice sighed. "Stubborn as ever, but he loves you still." Static, then silence. The battle raged on. Ardent's squad was down to 5. The crimson soldiers pressed closer, their weapons burning holes through the air itself. Ardent fell back toward the ruins of the chapel, the relic vault behind her, half collapsed, half buried. She stumbled into the shadow of Saint Veridiana's statue, cracked but still standing, and dropped to one knee. "Saint Veridiana," she whispered, "you who burned for him, show me the path." A shell exploded nearby, throwing her aside. When the dust settled, the statue's head had fallen. In the hollow where it once stood, something glowed faintly, a reliquary core, small and golden, still intact. She reached for it. The moment her fingers touched the metal, a surge of memory tore through her. Voices, centuries old, layered over one another in endless prayer. She saw worlds burning, sisters marching, faith unbroken. And beneath it all, a deeper pulse, the same rhythm she had felt in the false cathedral, but purer now, clearer. The relic's light spread up her arm, through her armor, filling her vision. The pain was exquisite. Every scar she had ever earned blazed anew. The battlefield faded away, replaced by blinding brilliance. And in that light a voice spoke, not the whisper of the Crimson Man, not the false comfort of Elira, but something vast, distant and unyielding. "My daughter," it said, "you were never meant to see paradise. You were meant to guard it." Tears streamed down her face inside the helm. "Then tell me what to do." "Burn it all." The vision shattered. Ardent found herself on her feet, the relic blazing in her hand. The crimson soldiers hesitated, momentarily blinded by the sudden radiance. She turned to the remaining sisters. "Fall back to the vault." "But now." They obeyed. She jammed the relic into the cracked floor. The stone sizzled and began to glow, runes igniting in concentric circles around it. A wind rose from nowhere, pulling at their armor, tearing ash into a vortex. The crimson soldiers screamed, not in fear but in ecstasy, as the light enveloped them. Their bodies burned away into smoke, leaving only the echo of their hymn. The ground itself split and fire roared upward, white and blinding. When it was over, there was no courtyard, no cathedral, only a field of glass stretching as far as the eye could see. The sisters lay scattered, some alive, some not. Ardent stood in the center, armor scorched, relic melted to slag in her palm. She looked up. The wound in the sky was closing. The light dimmed to a dull, bruised red before fading entirely. Silence fell. Then a whisper. Not from above, but from beneath. The sound of something stirring deep within the glass, far below the surface. Ardent dropped to one knee, pressed her gauntlet against the smooth ground. The heat pulsed faintly, alive. The fire had not destroyed whatever she had awakened. It had only buried it deeper. Behind her, Sister Corva's voice, weak but alive, broke the silence. "Sister, what happens now?" Ardent didn't answer at first. She looked at the horizon, where the ruins of the nearest hive city smoldered. The air shimmered faintly, like breath on glass. "We hold," she said finally, "until the bells stop." But there were no bells left to ring. When the fires cooled, the world looked like it had been remade from sorrow itself. The ground stretched in smooth, colorless waves where stone and bone and faith had melted together into something hard and seamless. No wind moved across it, no dust rose from it. It reflected the sky like water but felt solid beneath their boots. The Sisters of the Blazing Heart had seen battlefields before, but nothing that felt so final, so deliberate, as if the planet itself had been sealed inside a reliquary for some terrible purpose. Sister Ardent walked among the survivors, her armor scorched to the color of obsidian. There were 9 left now, 9 out of the 83 who had stood on the walls of Sanctum Veridiana when the first ships descended. They moved like shades through the ruin, voices low, steps heavy. The air shimmered faintly with heat that refused to dissipate, and beneath the glass they could see shadows shifting slowly, as though the world still breathed somewhere deep below. Corva limped at her side, her helm gone, a long band of cloth wrapped around her head. Blood had dried in a dark streak across her cheek. She carried her bolter loosely in one hand but didn't look at it anymore. Every sound seemed too loud in the silence that had followed the firestorm. Even their footsteps echoed like gunfire. "Do you think it's over?" Corva asked finally. Ardent didn't answer. The question itself felt dangerous. She scanned the horizon. The vault was gone, vaporized in the blast. The statues, the chapel, the ash gone. Only the faint outline of the city's distant towers remained, their tops severed clean as if by a blade. The sun above was dimmer now, pale and cold, casting no warmth. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "The Emperor does not grant endings, only purpose." Corva looked down at the glass beneath her feet. "Then what purpose is this?" Ardent didn't reply, but the same question burned in her mind. The relic had answered her plea with fire, and she had obeyed. But fire was never mercy. It only revealed what should not remain. They made camp near what had once been the cathedral's outer wall. The glass there rose in jagged ridges that offered some shelter from the wind. The sisters gathered in silence, stripping broken armor, binding wounds, whispering litanies that sounded hollow in the vast stillness. Someone found the remains of a rations crate buried half in the glass, its contents fused but edible. They shared it without comment, the taste of ash thick in their throats. When night came, the stars appeared unnaturally bright, unblinking. The sky seemed closer now, as if the fires had burned away the veil between mortal sight and whatever lay beyond. Ardent couldn't sleep. The relic's last light still shimmered in her mind whenever she closed her eyes. You were meant to guard it. The voice had been neither kind nor cruel, only true. Near midnight, Corva approached her again. The young sister's face was drawn, eyes hollow from exhaustion. "There's something moving," she said quietly. Ardent turned. "Where?" Corva pointed toward the center of the field. The glass there rippled faintly, like water disturbed from below. For a moment, Ardent thought it might be heat distortion. But then the ripples grew, spreading outward in concentric rings. The ground began to hum softly, a deep vibration that passed up through their boots and into their bones. "Positions," Ardent barked. The sisters moved instantly, forming a semicircle around the disturbance. Bolters came up, targeting lenses flickering to life in the darkness. The hum grew louder. Cracks spidered across the glass, glowing faintly from within. Then, with a sound like the breaking of a great bell, the surface split. Something rose from the fissure, not a machine, not a man. It was a figure of light and ash, its shape shifting as it climbed upward. At times it looked like a human form clad in radiant armor. At others, it was a shadow shaped by the memory of fire. The sisters opened fire immediately. Bolter rounds screamed across the field, detonating against its body, but each explosion only made it brighter. The air filled with the smell of ozone and incense. Ardent held her fire. She could feel it, whatever it was calling to her, not in words but in recognition. The same pulse she had felt beneath her gauntlet earlier now roared through her chest. The creature stopped its ascent and turned its featureless face toward her. For a heartbeat, she saw something behind the light, a face she knew, Canoness Elira. The others saw it too. Murmurs spread through the line. "It's her," one whispered. "She lives." "No," Ardent said, but her voice lacked conviction. The figure stepped closer, the ground beneath it melting and reforming with every stride. When it spoke, its voice was layered, Elira's tone wrapped in something older, colder. "Daughter Ardent, you have done well." Every muscle in Ardent's body went rigid. "Elira is dead." Death is a word for the faithless. We were never meant to die, only to transform. The figure extended a hand. "You unleashed his flame. You burned away the false light. Now the new order begins. Take your place beside me." Ardent took a step back. "You are not the Emperor's will." The figure tilted its head. "And yet you heard him, you obeyed." The hum grew louder. The glass beneath their feet began to crack again, smaller fissures radiating outward. Shapes moved within the fractures, more figures forming, pale and half-formed, each one glowing faintly with the same inner fire. Corva raised her bolter. "They're multiplying." "Hold your fire," Ardent ordered, but she wasn't sure why. There was something in those figures, something familiar. She saw faces from her order among them, sisters who had fallen days or weeks before. They looked serene, unbroken, their eyes glowing with steady light. Elira, or the thing that wore her face, smiled faintly. "This is the Emperor's mercy. To suffer is to serve. To burn is to become eternal." "No," Ardent whispered. "That's not mercy, that's consumption." She triggered her vox. "Sisters, retreat to the ridge, fall back." But before they could move, the ground erupted again. One of the new figures burst fully free of the glass, light cascading from its open wounds. It screamed, not in pain but in rapture, and reached for Corva. Ardent moved without thought, firing point-blank. The shot tore through the creature's torso, sending shards of glass and light into the air. It staggered but did not fall. "Ardent," Corva cried, "what are they?" Ardent's voice was steel. "They're what happens when faith forgets its cost." The air filled with screams. The glowing forms advanced, each step warping the ground beneath them. The sisters fell back toward the ridge, firing as they went, bolter rounds detonating in white bursts that left afterimages burned into their vision. Ardent covered their retreat, every shot a prayer, every reload a defiance. As they reached the ridge, Corva stumbled, her leg giving out. Ardent caught her, dragging her behind a slab of fused stone. "We can't hold them," Corva gasped. "They're not stopping." Ardent looked out over the field. Dozens of figures now moved through the glass, their bodies shedding light like burning incense. Each one bore the faint outline of a sister's armor. Each one carried the same expression of bliss. The ground beneath the ridge shuddered. The cracks spread up the slope, glowing veins of molten glass reaching toward them. The sound was deafening, a deep, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat rising from the planet's core. Then she understood. The relic hadn't destroyed the corruption. It had sealed it, buried it beneath the surface like a wound under scar tissue, and now it was breaking free. Ardent turned to the others. "Listen to me," she said. "The relic's fire came from below. That means its source is still there. If we can reach it, if we can destroy it completely, this might end." "How?" Corva asked. Ardent looked at the fissure where Elira stood, her light blazing brighter with every moment. "We go down." The sisters stared at her as if she'd gone mad. "Into the wound," one whispered. "Into the wound," Ardent said. "It was his will that we guard paradise. We failed. Now we guard what's left." No one argued. Perhaps they were too tired, or perhaps they no longer cared whether they lived or died. Ardent climbed to her feet, reloading her bolter, the heat from the glass already burning through her boots. She could feel the pulse growing stronger with every step toward the fissure. Elira watched her approach. "You can't stop what has begun," she said softly. "You lit the flame, now it spreads." Arden's voice was quiet but steady. "Then I'll die trying to smother it." Elira smiled, a sad, almost human smile. "You already did." And then the glass gave way beneath her. Arden fell. The world turned to light and fire, the scream of rending metal and the rush of wind deafening her as she plunged into the glowing abyss. Her armor's sensors flickered, warning sigils flooding her vision, but she didn't stop. The fall seemed endless, a descent through layers of molten crystal and whispering voices. At last she struck something solid. Pain flared, then dulled. She rose slowly, surrounded by darkness shot through with veins of crimson light. The air was heavy, liquid, filled with the hum of machinery far beyond comprehension. In the center of the cavern stood a pillar of fused metal and bone, cables and arteries intertwining into a single colossal structure. Within it pulsed a light that throbbed like a living heart. The source. Arden took a step forward and stopped. She wasn't alone. Figures moved in the shadows, tall and gaunt, wrapped in the remnants of Mechanicus robes. Their bodies were fused with the pillar, faces half absorbed, mouths whispering in endless prayer. She raised her bolter. One of them turned toward her, its eyes glowing faintly. "Do not fear," it rasped. "You are witnessing his renewal." Arden's reply was a whisper. "No, I'm witnessing his theft." She fired. The first shot struck the pillar, sending ripples through the light. The second struck the nearest figure, shattering it into molten fragments. The chamber roared in response, the pulse quickening, the heat rising. Above, the glass cracked again, letting shafts of fire pour down like sunlight through stained glass. She could hear the battle still raging above, the sisters' voices fading into the distance. Arden dropped her last grenade at the pillar's base, whispered a final prayer, and turned away. "Emperor," she murmured, "guide my hand even if it burns with me." The detonation was silent, a flash of white that consumed everything. When the light faded, the cavern was gone. The field above was no longer glass. It was ash again, drifting in slow spirals across a sky that had gone black. Of the Sisters of the Blazing Heart, there was no trace. Only a single fragment of scorched armor lay at the center of the ruin, the aquila etched upon it cracked but unbroken. Far below, in the silence where the pillar had been, something still pulsed once, and then was still. When Arden opened her eyes, she thought she was still falling. The world spun slowly around her, a great cathedral of silence built from ash and echoes. She could no longer tell where up or down began, only that the darkness moved with breath and intention, alive in a way that no void should be. Her armor's internal systems had gone dark, her vox silent. The only light came from faint sigils burning across her gauntlet, the remnants of the relic's touch. Her body felt weightless, yet every heartbeat echoed like hammer strikes. When she tried to move, the world shuddered around her, the ash lifting and parting like waves in water. She wasn't on solid ground anymore. She was standing on what looked like a reflection of the world above, inverted and endless, stretching in all directions. The ruins of Sanctum Veridiana hovered overhead, mirrored in reverse. She realized with quiet dread that she had fallen beneath the skin of the planet, into the wound she had sworn to seal. Then came the voices. At first they were faint, more vibration than sound. But soon they formed words, Latin hymns twisted into alien cadences, prayers sung backward. Arden could almost recognize them, echoes of the sermons she'd learned as a novice but warped. Every syllable vibrated through her bones, each word burrowing into her mind like a nail of light. "Daughter of fire," they whispered, "you burned paradise. Why do you flee from what you made?" She turned sharply, her bolter raised out of instinct. Nothing stood behind her, only a figure taking shape within the ash itself, like smoke deciding to stand upright. Its armor was charred, its face hidden behind a broken helm. The faint glow of a power sword hummed at its side. For a heartbeat she thought it might be one of her fallen sisters, But when it spoke again, the voice was not human. "You think faith is suffering," it said, its tone neither mocking nor cruel, merely curious. "You mistake your endurance for devotion. That is your species' tragedy." Arden steadied her breath. "Name yourself." "I have no name," it replied. "Not one your tongue remembers. Once they called me the custodian of the first flame. Now I am what remains of your relic." The realization struck like a blade through her chest. The relic, the radiant shard that had answered her plea, that had burned the corruption from the surface, had not been divine at all. It had been something ancient, imprisoned, something the Emperor himself had locked away long ago. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling despite herself, "you deceived us." "No," said the figure, "you deceived yourself. You asked for salvation and you mistook annihilation for grace. You called upon the Emperor's fire. You never asked whose fire he took." The ash beneath her feet shifted. She saw shapes moving within it, faces, hands reaching upward, the faint outlines of sisters consumed in the blast above. They were not corpses. They were alive, in a sense, trapped between form and spirit, whispering prayers to something that was no longer the Emperor. Arden backed away, horror tightening her chest. "Release them." "They are free," the figure said calmly. "Free of pain, free of flesh, free of doubt. What greater gift is there than certainty?" "You speak of slavery." "I speak of truth. You worship a corpse on a throne and call it godhood. But we, the remnants of his discarded flames, we remember him before that. We remember when his light was not bound by man's fear. The Emperor's shadow is vast, sister, and you stand within it even now." She raised her bolter. "Then I'll light a candle." The shot echoed like thunder in a tomb. The bolt round struck the figure's chest and detonated, scattering ash and flame across the darkness. But when the smoke cleared, it stood untouched. Its head tilted slightly, almost admiring her defiance. "Good," it said. "Keep that fire, you'll need it." Then the ground gave way. Arden plunged again, this time into light. Not the holy brilliance of a chapel, but something raw and unfiltered, the color of blood seen through water. She landed hard on metal, her armor screaming in protest. The air here was dry and electric, tasting of ozone and old oil. She looked up and froze. Before her rose a structure that defied sense, a cathedral built from the bones of machines, its spires reaching upward and downward at once, mirrored in the void. Along its walls hung banners made from flayed parchment inscribed with scripture, but every word was reversed, like a reflection. In the center of the hall stood a massive, broken statue of the Emperor, his face obscured, his hands outstretched as if in judgment. At the base of the statue knelt a woman. Her armor was polished silver, her tabard marked with the aquila, but the symbol burned black. Her head was bowed, her hair white as ash. When she spoke, her voice sent a shiver through Arden's spine. "I told you it wasn't over. Canoness Elira." She rose slowly, turning toward Arden. The light caught her face, revealing features both familiar and wrong. Her eyes glowed faintly, not the gold of sanctity but the dull red of cooling embers. "I saw you fall," Arden said, her voice breaking. "You saw me rise," Elira corrected gently. "The fire showed me the truth. There is no salvation in obedience, only in surrender." "You sound like them." "I am them," she smiled sadly. "And so are you, you just haven't accepted it yet." Arden stepped forward, bolter raised. "You're corrupted." "Am I, or am I finally honest?" Elira began to walk toward her, each step echoing in perfect rhythm with the pulse of the unseen heart beneath the ground. "You prayed for the Emperor to answer you. He did not. The flame did. And now you stand before his shadow demanding to know which is holy. Tell me, Sister Arden, if the light burns you, does it make it evil or merely true?" The words struck deep. Arden remembered the day she took her vows, the way the chapel had smelled of oil and incense, the way Elira had pressed her hand to her brow and said, "You will be a weapon of his mercy." Mercy had always been a lie dressed in fire. She lowered her weapon slightly. "If you believe this, why let me live?" "Because you are proof," Elira said, "proof that the flame still chooses. The Emperor's dream wasn't salvation, it was evolution. We were meant to become more than flesh. The Mechanicus tried to imitate that. They built machines, but she spread her arms. We become them." Behind her, the shadows began to move, figures emerging from the cathedral walls, their bodies half flesh, half glass, each one glowing faintly. Sisters, her sisters, Corva among them. Arden's throat closed. "No." "Yes," Elira whispered. "They saw what you will see. They accepted their place in the new order. The fire remade them. You can join them. All you have to do is kneel." For a moment, Arden wavered. The light around them pulsed like a heartbeat, washing over her armor, filling every crack with warmth. For the first time in what felt like centuries, the pain faded. Her thoughts cleared. She saw Corva smiling, her face serene, her eyes no longer haunted. Then she saw the truth beneath it, the stillness. No will, no fear, no self. She lifted her bolter again, tears burning behind her eyes. "I would rather burn alone than live like that." Elira's smile didn't fade. "Then burn you shall." The sisters moved as one, their motions unnaturally smooth, synchronized as though controlled by a single heartbeat. Ardent fired, the cathedral erupting in light and thunder. Statues shattered, banners burned. The air filled with the roar of sanctified fire and the hiss of melting metal. She fought like a cornered animal, every motion pure instinct. For every sister that fell, two more stepped from the walls. Elira advanced slowly through the chaos, untouched, her voice rising in a chant that matched the pulse of the world itself. "You cannot kill faith," she said. "You can only change its shape." Arden's bolter clicked empty. She drew her blade, a relic of the order, its edge etched with the names of the fallen, and charged. Their swords met in a shower of sparks. The impact sent shockwaves through the floor, cracking the mirrored glass beneath them. Light poured upward from below, and for a moment it felt as though the planet itself screamed. Elira's strength was inhuman. Every blow drove Ardent backward, her knees buckling, her lungs burning. She caught a strike, twisted, and rammed her gauntlet into Elira's side. The blow sent a flare of light through the canoness's armor, but she only laughed. "Do you feel it?" Elira gasped. "He's watching us, not as God, as witness." Ardent drove her sword through Elira's chest. The canoness gasped, eyes wide, and smiled even as the light began to pour from the wound. "Yes," she whispered. "That's it. That's what he wanted to see." The light spread. Elira's body dissolved into flame, her voice echoing through the chamber like a hymn. "Burn, my child. Burn until only truth remains." The explosion threw Ardent backward. She struck the ground hard, her armor cracked, her weapon shattered. The cathedral began to collapse, its mirrored walls folding inward as if devoured by invisible hands. She dragged herself to her feet, stumbling toward the center where the statue had stood. In its place was a pit of pure light, pulsing like a heart. She could hear Elira's voice still, softer now, woven with 1,000 others, the voices of every sister she had lost. "Join us," they whispered. "End it." Ardent stood at the edge, the heat peeling away the last of her armor. She could barely breathe, barely think. But her hands still worked. She reached down, picked up her broken blade, and whispered the prayer every sister learned before their first battle. "The Emperor protects, even from his own fire." Then she leapt into the light. The world went silent. For an instant she saw everything. The truth of the flame, the shape of the shadow, the Emperor's face not as man or God but as something beyond both. And she understood. Faith was not obedience. It was defiance. The light went out. Above, the planet split open, a pillar of fire reaching into the void. The fleet in orbit watched as the surface cracked like glass, the city consumed in brilliance. When it faded, all that remained was silence. On the bridge of the St. Enoch, an astropath shuddered violently, her eyes bleeding light. She turned toward the captain and whispered, "They are free." Then she collapsed. The transmission cut. No one in orbit spoke for a long time. The planet below, once called Veridiana, once home to thousands of faithful, a fortress world of the ecclesiarchy, had gone completely dark. Not destroyed in the way exterminatus worlds were, no roiling cloud or molten crust. It had simply stopped. The fires extinguished themselves as if commanded to rest. The seas, once black with ash, lay glass-flat, reflecting the stars. No Vox transmission rose. No prayer. No cry. On the bridge of the St. Enoch, the captain sat unmoving, his face pale beneath the flickering lumen strips. Around him, adepts whispered reports that made no sense. Atmospheric readings at zero variance, energy signatures frozen mid-fluctuation, like the entire planet had been placed inside a moment that refused to end. The astropath's blood still smoked on the deck, a faint scent of incense clinging to it, the way relics sometimes smelled of oil and devotion. "She said they were free," murmured one of the crew, his voice unsteady. What did she mean? The captain didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the viewport where Veridiana hung in silence, a perfect sphere, unscarred by what had unfolded. "Free," he said softly, almost reverently. "From what?" Far below, in the core of that impossible stillness, Sister Ardent drew breath. It came slow, labored through lungs that no longer hurt. Her armor was gone, her body was unmarked. She stood barefoot on a plain of white dust that shimmered faintly as if lit from within. There was no sky, no horizon, just a brightness that came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Her hands trembled. The last thing she remembered was fire, the searing light, the weightless fall, Elira's voice calling her name. And now this. She knelt, fingers brushing the dust. It felt like ash, but when she lifted it, it dissolved between her fingers, leaving no trace. Her own reflection shimmered faintly in the air before her, as if the light itself remembered her shape. Then came a sound, not a word, not even a whisper, more like the exhale of a great engine winding down. She turned. Elira stood there, or something wearing Elira's shape. No armor, no weapon, just robes of white that flowed like smoke. Her eyes no longer burned red or gold, they were clear, almost human. "Is this death?" Arden asked quietly. Elira smiled, and for the first time since the war began, it looked real. "No," she said, "this is what was left." Ardent rose. "Where are we?" "In between," Elira said simply. "The relic was never meant to destroy, it was meant to reveal. When you fell into it, you burned away what bound you. The corruption, the pain, the lies we carried even in our prayers." She stepped closer, her bare feet leaving no mark in the dust. "You freed us." Arden shook her head. "I killed you." "You released us," Elira corrected. "You saw the truth. The Emperor's fire was never meant to save flesh, it was meant to refine it, and you are what remains after the refining." Ardent looked around again, unease settling in her gut. There was no sound, no wind, no motion save for the faint shimmer of the air. "Where are the others?" Elira extended a hand. "Here." The light shifted. Shapes began to appear around them, dozens, then hundreds. Sisters of the Blazing Heart, their faces serene, their armor gone. They stood in silence, their bodies luminous, their eyes filled with quiet recognition. Corva was among them, her expression soft, her lips curved in something between sorrow and peace. Arden took a step back. "No," she whispered. "This isn't what he wanted. The Emperor protects, he gives purpose, he—" "Does he?" Elira asked gently. "Or did we give his silence meaning so we could bear it?" The words struck deep. For a long time, Ardent had lived by the creed that suffering was proof of faith, that the pain of duty was the Emperor's way of measuring her devotion. But here, in this stillness, she felt no pain and no absence of him either. Only quiet. "What happens now?" she asked. Elira's gaze turned upward, though there was no sky. "Now we wait. Perhaps this is purgation. Perhaps it is completion. Perhaps we have become the hymn we once sang." The hymn. The Emperor's light is vast, Elira said softly. For every shadow it casts there must be a counterbalance. We were his flame, now we are his echo, a song that never ends even when the world stops singing. The sisters began to hum, low, resonant, a harmony without words. The sound grew until it seemed to vibrate through the dust itself, through Ardent's bones, through everything. It was beautiful and unbearable, like memory turned into music. But Ardent did not join. Something inside her resisted. If this is peace, she said, why does it feel like surrender? Elira looked at her sadly. Because you were made to fight. The ground trembled, the hum faltered. For the first time a ripple of shadow passed across the light. Elira turned, her expression tightening. What is that? Ardent asked. Something that shouldn't be here, Elira whispered. The brightness around them began to darken, faintly at first, then rapidly like a tide retreating from the shore. The sisters' forms flickered, their harmony breaking. From the horizon, or what passed for one, came a shape, vast and formless, moving with impossible slowness. Ardent's breath caught. She had seen demons before, warp entities, nightmares born of human sin, but this was different. It had no face, no claws, no voice. It was absence made manifest, a void wearing the outline of divinity. Wherever it passed, the light folded inward and died. Elira stepped forward, her expression unreadable. He comes. Who? The other half of faith, she murmured, the Emperor's shadow. The realization hit Ardent like a physical blow. This wasn't the warp. This wasn't hell. It was balance. If the flame still existed here, then so did the darkness it had cast. And now that she had seen both, one was calling to the other. The void stopped moving. For a moment nothing happened. Then a voice filled the air, not spoken but absolute. You called me. Ardent fell to her knees, her hands pressed to her ears, but it made no difference. The sound came from within, vibrating through her skull, through her soul. Elira stood still, her head bowed in reverence or resignation. You lit my flame, you carried my name, and still you doubted. Ardent gasped, You're not him. No, I am what remains when faith forgets why it began. Elira turned to her, eyes wide now with understanding and terror. Run, she whispered. But there was nowhere to go. The void expanded, swallowing the light, erasing sisters one by one. Their hymns turned to static, their forms to dust. Elira reached for Ardent, but her hand dissolved before it could touch her. Ardent screamed, wordless, defiant, and the sound tore through the silence like a blade. For the first time the void recoiled. It was not much, but enough. She could feel something still burning in her chest, a spark that refused to die. The relic's mark, the last remnant of the Emperor's fire. She stood, her body outlined in gold light, the air around her trembling. You don't get to take this, she said, her voice steady now. Not from me, not from them. The void surged forward. She met it head-on. The collision was not explosion but implosion, a collapse of all light and shadow into a single heartbeat. For one impossible instant, every sister's voice joined hers, their hymn rising into a crescendo that shattered the stillness. Then silence again. When the St. Enoch's sensors flickered back to life 3 hours later, Veridiana was gone. In its place was a single point of light, faint but steady, suspended where the planet had once been. No mass, no gravity, no heat, only a glow, pure and unbroken. The captain ordered the ship to hold position. No one spoke. The astropath's body, long since cold, lay beneath a shroud. A junior officer approached quietly. Sir, he said, should we record this as annihilation? The captain shook his head. No, he murmured, record it as ascension. And far beyond the reach of any mortal tongue, in a place where sound no longer existed, a single note lingered, soft, endless, radiant. It was the hymn of the Sisters of the Blazing Heart. And in that note, faint but eternal, Sister Ardent's voice could still be heard.